Washington, D.C.
I gave them a chance. I wanted to give them a chance at making a deal. You know, we had a deal 2 days ago. It was done. And then all of a sudden, they couldn't do it. They didn't like something about the deal. They couldn't do it. And they shot first, and that was a big mistake that they shot first, because we have been knocking the hell out of them.
Breaking news, blockade back on. Tonight, the U.S. military launching another round of strikes against Iran and reinstating a naval blockade against all vessels transiting to and from Iranian ports, all starting in the last hour. We'll hear ahead from Republican Congressman Darrell Issa, sits on the House Foreign Relations Committee, in just a moment. And let's make a deal. President Trump backing away from shipping fees through the Strait of Hormuz just 24 hours after demanding a 20% cut. The deals Trump is pursuing instead. And mission not accomplished. Kevin Warsh in his first congressional testimony as Fed chair, vowing to deliver price stability, saying more work must be done to fight inflation, even as today's CPI shows prices falling for the first time in 6 years. From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kaylee Lyons.
And Joe, we start tonight's coverage off at the White House with the president issuing a major reversal following threats just 24 hours ago. Trump backing off that 20% fee for the Strait of Hormuz shipments, as you mentioned, after it was widely derided, now saying the revenue will be replaced with investment deals instead.
I don't like the concept of a fee. But at the same time, it's not fair that we're protecting this strait for the entire world, for China and everyone. I don't mind protecting it for China. I don't mind protecting it for anybody, but it's unfair that we're not in somehow compensated.
The U.S. blockade of the strait is now officially back in effect in the last hour, with U.S. Central Command also confirming it began more strikes against Iran earlier this afternoon. And joining us now for more from the White House is Bloomberg's Kate Sullivan. So, Kate, do we have any sense of what form these deals really will take, what the dollar figures are, and whether they'll be delivered before there is an end to this conflict, whenever that is?
It's a great question, Kaylee. We do not yet have those details. We do not know what specifically the president is talking about when he says he's going to focus on these trade and investment deals. We don't know which countries in particular. But this reversal is a pretty stunning one. You know, yesterday the president saying that he was going to impose this 20% fee on cargo ships transiting through the Strait of Hormuz, and then today completely backing off of that, and notably saying that Gulf leaders had called him directly and had convinced him to back off of that and to focus instead on these deals. Today, you know, the state of play, as you mentioned, the naval blockade is back into effect. U.S. Central Command said that it was back into effect at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so just in the last hour. The standoff continues over the future of the Strait of Hormuz, what is going to happen there. And as you mentioned, the U.S. continues to carry out these strikes, these airstrikes on Iran. So we haven't seen, you know, it remains to be seen. Of course, this conflict has been going on for months now. The president had signaled several times that it was going to be wrapping up. We're in a very different place today than we were just last week when the president said that the ceasefire was over and that agreement that was reached between the U.S. and Iran was now dead.
Of course, this helped to push oil prices higher today, Kate, and gas prices may well follow, which is not great news when you look at the benefit of recently lower gas prices on today's CPI report. The Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, had his first congressional testimony today. He said mission not accomplished on this front. What's the president think?
That's right. So as Warsh was really downplaying the significance of this June CPI report, the president was striking a very different tone in the Oval Office with reporters. He was even suggesting, touting the report and suggesting that it might help Republicans in the midterms. Let's listen to what he had to say.
The report was incredible. Inflation is way down. That means prices are coming way down, and we're doing a great job. Remember that for the midterms, I say to that camera. Remember that, because nobody else could do it. Prices are way down. Prices are coming way down, and we're going to bring them much lower yet.
The president has, of course, been applying immense pressure on the Fed, particularly on former Fed Chair Jerome Powell. He was relentlessly attacking Powell over what he said was needed to cut interest rates. He said that Powell needed to cut interest rates. He made that very clear over and over again. Warsh was asked by lawmakers on Capitol Hill how he would handle this pressure from the president, how he would make decisions. He reaffirmed that the Fed would remain independent and said that he was committed to bringing down inflation.
Kate, thank you so much. Live from the White House, Bloomberg's Kate Sullivan. And with the U.S. blockade now back in place in the Strait of Hormuz and airstrikes resuming against Iran, we had the chance to speak with Republican Congressman Darrell Issa of California today. He's vice chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, as well a member of the House Judiciary. We began the interview by asking him about the administration's objectives in Iran.
I believe the United States and President Trump will finish the job this time. I think when we look back in history, over 4 decades, almost 47 years, Ronald Reagan once sunk 2 ships and killed the admiral that ran them in the early days of Iran doing things like it's doing now. And it did stop them for a while. But I think we realize now that we need not just a temporary stoppage because of kinetic activity, but an assurance that it won't start again. And that's where President Trump did a tremendous amount of damage, sued for peace, gave them an opportunity, made an agreement. They broke it. And now he's back saying, we'll make another agreement, but only when you really mean it.
Well, and it becomes a question, Congressman, of when exactly that will be. Should the president be allowed unlimited time to finish this job?
Well, I think it's important to remember that in the scope of 47 years, 60 days isn't very much. But I do think there is a clear path that the president has shown he's going to take. He will fight like there's no peace talks, and he'll do peace talks like there isn't a war and that these people can be trusted. And it's that 2-part approach that goes all the way back to the days of Richard Nixon when we sat at the table in Vietnam, for Vietnam in France, and on a given day, if they walked away from the table, we bombed North Vietnam. And on another day, we sat there and talked about a lasting peace. It's that Henry Kissinger 2-part process that President Trump, I think, has taken a page from. It's not easy, and in the case of both North Korea, South Korea years ago, and then Vietnam also years ago, these talks took a while, and the combat did continue off and on during that time.
Yeah. Well, and considering your view on history with regard to those events in our recent history, Congressman, the president, when he last defended the MOU just days ago, said, "I didn't want to see economic catastrophe." That's a quote. If you had kept that going, that could have happened, unquote. Is it possible that this could still bring destruction to our economy by way of higher oil and gas prices?
Well, as you know, we're a self-sufficient, even exporting of both oil and natural gas. So our ability to be self-sufficient and, in fact, to keep prices under control has been demonstrated. But it still is having an economic impact. Last month, the inflation rate was actually down. It is likely to be up next month if we continue that long. Right. And the president's acutely aware of it. But at some point, you have to say, if not after 47 years, then when will we confront this thug that has killed Americans and others around the world?
Well, I do realize your view on that. I'm just curious your thoughts on what the cost should be or should be allowed. If it means, in terms of the president's words, an economic catastrophe, we're all paying the same global price for oil, right?
Well, we pay slightly less in the U.S. and slightly more in California, but no question at all. There's a price for this, and I couldn't agree with you more that the president has to continue to take this 2-part approach: sue for peace whenever it's possible, conduct a war to make sure that Iran cannot terrorize its neighbors and the rest of the world, nor can they put their nuclear program back together. But I do think that there's no question at all that when we look at the price that Iran has extracted over 47 years of their tyranny, it is worth doing it. And, back to history again, I was a young lieutenant and a captain when we were still in the Cold War, and we fought that war for 6 decades before the Berlin Wall fell, and we began to have at least some of those countries enjoy peace, democracy, and prosperity. It's not easy, and it won't be free, but freedom never is.
Well, it certainly won't be free. There is the financial cost to consider, as the Pentagon, of course, has requested supplemental funding from Congress. The president is pushing for $350 billion for the Pentagon in a budget reconciliation package that I know House leadership is hoping to advance later this week. How is any of that supposed to get done so long as the floor is still held up over the Save America Act? Does the president need to choose his priorities here?
Well, I think we all need to choose our priorities. I will say that many people realize that this defense buildup is as much the result of the missiles and drones that we've seen in Ukraine and now used in coming out of Iran, a recognition that we need to pivot to the creation of these light responses, affordable responses, while we're still using some of our legacy systems. And that's a big part of the modernization that we realize would, in the long run, pay dividends, but that we have to make these investments in now.
To put a finer point on Kayleigh's question, Congressman, does President Trump need to call off the dogs here? You've got a House floor that's being held hostage, as some like to say, by at least one member of Congress, and Anna Paulina Luna. How long can you function in this scenario?
Well, look, I have confidence that we, like others have said in the past, we always do the right thing when we exhaust the alternatives. Do I believe we need to ensure that we have the most honest and the most trustworthy and the highest confidence of the American people in our elections? Absolutely. And I think the Save America Act takes us a long way that way. Is it as equally important to these global issues? Absolutely. Can we walk and chew bubble gum at the same time? We're working. We're trying to do that. But let's understand, the Save America Act has been sent to the Senate multiple times. The problem on that, as is the problem on much of our appropriations, lies in the Senate. So we'll do what we can do. We'll do what we need to do. But we'll be pushing hard for the Senate to find their way into giving us a joint legislation that can be sent to the president.
We appreciate you weighing in on all of this, especially given your perch as vice chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. I would also like to ask you about work you've done in the Judiciary Committee. You led a report that Coupang, a U.S. company that primarily operates out of South Korea, it's been called the Amazon of South Korea, has been unfairly targeted by a pro-Chinese agenda operating inside the South Korean government. What can you tell us about that, and what's the recourse of Congress?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because currently I've met with foreign ministers from South Korea and others, and they're sticking to what they're doing. This government was elected. It was kind of a whiplash. They believe they have a mandate that includes buying more and doing more with China. We think that's a huge mistake, especially for an ally whose very existence would be snuffed out if China had had their way during the Korean conflict. So that's a decision that we think is wrong. All we can really do is say, quite candidly, that we expect our companies to be treated under a reasonable international rule of law. And when they're not, then we have tools that we have to use to cause them to do so. But I'm going to add one more thing. Currently around the world, we depend on our partnership with South Korea for everything from 155 howitzer rounds to small and medium tanks. They are an important historic partner, and we want to both use the stick to get their behavior changed, but understand they're an important partner, and we want to get them back on track.
All right, Congressman Darrell Issa of California, the vice chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Thank you so much for joining us on Bloomberg TV.
Thank you very much, Kayleigh.
And as we discussed with the congressman, oil prices did continue their climb today, with stocks also rising on the cooler than expected CPI report and record-setting results from big banks. The one big outlier, IBM, which dropped the most since at least 1968, wiping out over $69 billion in market value on its disappointing prelim second quarter revenue. For more, we turn to Power Moves with Bloomberg's Nora Melinda, who joins live from World Headquarters in New York. Nora.
A solid day on Wall Street. We saw U.S. stocks rebounding on the day, and in the bond market, yields falling. Of course, we did get that CPI data for the month of June, showing the first decline in 6 years. So you did see green across the screen as we take a look at major indexes. The S&P 500 higher by about 0.4%. That driven higher by technology stocks, communication services. And on the lower side, healthcare and consumer staples, the worst performing sectors in the market there. But we also had a kickoff to earnings season, and that was really buoying sentiment. We got some strong results out of the big banks on Wall Street, where we did get some trading desks delivering some record results. Goldman recording, seeing a record more than $7 billion in equities revenue. We saw JP Morgan reporting more than $6 billion in equities trading revenue, and Bank of America also reporting a solid record trading quarter. So we saw green all across the screen for that sector. But more broadly, as we take a look at the bond market, looking at treasuries, we saw bonds rallying and yields coming in lower. If you take a look at the policy-sensitive 2-year treasury yield, we did see that down by about 8 basis points. Earlier in the session, down by more than 14 basis points. So we did see CPI really outweighing some of the commentary that we got from Fed Chair Kevin Warsh on Capitol Hill, which came in a little bit more hawkish than some people were expecting.
All right, Nora, thank you so much. Meeting us at the threshold of another earnings reporting season, Bloomberg's Nora Melinda, live in New York. Coming up, what the president's reversal on the 20% fee or toll in the Strait means for the war with Iran and the oil market. And former Ambassador Barbara Leaf joins us next, only on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
I don't think the ceasefire was ever in place. I've been describing it more as a suspension of major hostilities because we were having every few days these tit-for-tat strikes, right? So that said, he's hinted at, but I'd like to hear him explicitly say the MOU is done.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kayleigh Lyons. That was the former Defense Secretary Mark Esper speaking to our colleague and the weekend host, David Gura, the host of Bloomberg This Weekend. Esper commenting on the current situation in Iran as the war ramps up, the U.S. unleashing another consecutive day of strikes as the president does a 180 on his threat to enforce 20% fees on goods through the Strait. Joining us now, former ambassador to the UAE, Barbara Leaf, also former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs under President Biden and a distinguished diplomatic fellow at the Middle East Institute. Ambassador, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. It seems we are back to start in Iran, and I'd like to begin with you, not so much on the blockade, but the idea of replacing tolling or a reimbursement fee, as the president first called it, with foreign direct investment from countries in the Middle East who have already committed hundreds of billions of dollars to the U.S. How is this going to work?
Well, I think this was a bit of sleight of hand. I'm not certain that there are any new investments. In fact, there were huge investments announced starting last March, with the UAE coming in with the proposal of, or a commitment of $1.4 trillion, followed by the Saudis and the Qataris during the May 2025 visit by the president to the Gulf. So I think he shocked everyone in the Gulf in the last 24 hours by announcing that these tolls would be assessed, and they would be assessed on the 6 countries that are most at risk because of this war. So I'm glad to see that he backed off on that, but I don't think there's any new commitments as such in FDI.
Well, he may have backed off on that. He did not back off on the reinstatement of the blockade, Ambassador. As of 4 p.m. Eastern time, it is back in effect. And once again, for many days in a row now, we are seeing strikes against Iranian targets. Do you foresee that this will come to a conclusion anytime soon, or will this be a stop-start scenario for the foreseeable future?
Well, Kayleigh, the only way it's going to come to an end is a negotiated end. This sort of escalation to de-escalate, or just simple escalation, risks being uncontrolled or risks simply being endless. And certainly the Iranians have an advantage, the advantage of a smaller power, but a power that has spent 4 decades perfecting its use of asymmetrical tools. And in this case, they've used drones very effectively to continue to threaten and then essentially close the Strait of Hormuz. So they're overmatched substantially by the U.S., which is a military superpower. But this is not where air power and standoff strikes can do the job of opening up the strait. You've got to open it, and you've got to maintain it being open. And that is simply not a task that can come without a huge risk and cost to the U.S.
There's some interesting new rhetoric from the president today, who had an event in the Oval Office that was unrelated. Reporters were there and asked questions about the situation with Iran. He said all of a sudden they couldn't do it, referring to a deal, he said, that was in place 2 days ago. Quote, they didn't like something about the deal. They couldn't do it, and they shot first, he said. That was a big mistake. They shot first because we've been knocking the hell out of them. There seems to be this sort of change in language about who started this conflict, Ambassador. We just heard from Congressman Darrell Issa, who reminds us this has been going on for 47 years. But the White House now seems to be implying that Iran restarted that war. Is that how you're seeing it?
Strictly speaking, yes, the president's correct. I was out in the Gulf in the last couple of weeks, and I got out there just after the Iranians had first savaged the Omanis in a public rhetoric, and then started firing at ships that were transiting through sovereign Omani waters. So it is true, they started this round. CENTCOM responded, they responded in kind, and so on, and we're off to the races. But this goes back to the original problem with the MOU, which was Article 5. The 2 sides came away with completely different understandings and determinations, interpretations of that article about the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, of course, we heard the president talking about it, and we were just showing our audience on Bloomberg television in the Oval Office with the Iraqi prime minister today, as we also saw the announcement and the push forward on an Iraq-Syria pipeline. And I wonder, as we consider the pipelines that may be built around the Strait of Hormuz, if that leverage you were talking about Iran having, even as a smaller power, might actually be eroded to a certain extent by countries deciding that they're going to look for other means of transit of their energy products.
Absolutely, over time, and that is the sort of the dual motivation for these countries. First of all, they want to ensure their own economic well-being by taking away a dependency on that one exit point. On the other hand, they want to send a very clear message to the Iranians. You know, you are overshooting the mark. You are overreaching. We're not going to be subjected to this kind of blackmail, essentially. And Iraq and Kuwait have been the most vulnerable of all because they literally have only one exit point, the Strait of Hormuz, for their crude. So it's smart on the part of the new prime minister, helped in this deal by the United States, to look at this Kirkuk pipeline that will stretch through Syria to the Mediterranean.
All right, Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us. Ambassador Barbara Leaf, we appreciate your time and insight. And still ahead, 12 state attorneys general are suing to block the Paramount-Warner Brothers Discovery merger. But what recourse do they have to halt the process after the DOJ already signed off last month? We'll be joined by the leader of the AG's effort, California Attorney General Rob Bonta, up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
So I want to make sure that we take the time to have a community investment framework to give to localities. But also, you have to be able to power yourselves. You want to come in. I said this in my State of the State back in January. I launched the Public Service Commission to start this process. They'll be done within this year of the moratorium, so we can have certainty for businesses. But you either bring your own power source, or you have to pay a premium to use our grid. And those are the basic foundations of what we're doing with this moratorium.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kaylee Lyons in Washington. That was the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, today, in an important interview with Bloomberg's podcast, Odd Lots, after New York became the first state in the nation to pump the brakes on the AI data center race. The Democratic governor announcing she's implementing a one-year moratorium on new large-scale data centers. And the move comes amid growing public outcries, of course, against the building of these massive facilities, and prohibitions against their build-outs have already passed in several towns nationwide. Now it's to the state level. Meantime, investment into AI remains all systems go for the Trump administration. Federal Reserve Chair Kevin Warsh was asked about the issue during his House testimony today. Listen.
It seems inevitable that that which we're now calling AI investment will soon just be called investment. Even so, new opportunities for the economy introduce new challenges for central bankers. We at the Fed are monitoring the implications for employment and for inflation.
Fed Chair Kevin Warsh there. Now turning to a major legal escalation in the fight to halt the mega Paramount-Warner Brothers merger that could soon reshape Hollywood after 12 state attorneys general signed onto a restraining order seeking to block the merger, with the AGs alleging, quote, this proposed $110 billion merger, the largest in Hollywood history, would extinguish competition between Paramount and Warner Brothers and inflict substantial harm on movie theaters, basic cable distributors, and ultimately audiences nationwide. We should note the Department of Justice has already approved the merger, while the EU is expected to rule on it next week. And joining us now for more is California State Attorney General Rob Bonta, who led this AG's effort. Mr. Attorney General, welcome back to Bloomberg. I wonder if this was the last resort option to delay this closing, or if there were conversations that happened perhaps privately with Paramount about potentially voluntarily delaying the closing.
Well, we were engaged in a 6-month-long investigation, doing all of our due diligence, getting appropriate documents, and doing a deep dive factually, and then doing a legal analysis. And during that time, we definitely had conversations with Paramount during the process, where the lines of communication are always open. And after the end of our investigation, the course of action that we thought was most appropriate was to bring a lawsuit to block the merger. And does that mean that conversations have to end now? It does not. But that is where we believe is what we believe is the appropriate course of action. So we filed in federal court yesterday to block the merger of Paramount and Warner Brothers. We think we have a very strong case where in 3 different markets we've set forth chapter and verse in our complaint. They violate federal antitrust law that's been on the books for over a century. And I think a judge will agree with us.
Governor Newsom has suggested that the DOJ abandoned its antitrust role in this case and has actually sought additional funding for your lawsuit, an additional $14 million for antitrust enforcement. Attorney General, going it alone will be expensive for California. What will it cost?
Yeah, you know, what the governor has suggested, as you say, I've explicitly said, the U.S. DOJ, the federal government, has abdicated its responsibility to engage in firm and fair antitrust enforcement. That's been a traditional role they've played. They're not playing it now. Not only are they not playing it, but they're actually affirmatively making things worse by trying to usher through deals that are unlawful time and time again. And so these are expensive cases. We sort of follow a rule of 20. It'll take $20 million and 20 attorneys to bring a successful antitrust lawsuit. We have 12 states all banding together. So we are very well resourced. We are very well resourced with money and with attorneys, whatever it takes. I know that Paramount-Warner Brothers has lawyered up to defend their conduct, which we believe is unlawful. I think they have 7 or 8 different major law firms across the country, and we're ready for it.
Well, so when we game out what exactly it could be that you are facing, how critical is this temporary injunction to your case? What happens if the merger is effectively allowed to close before the courts can reach a final decision? Even if you ultimately prevail, I would imagine a deal this size would be very difficult to unwind.
We believe we've appropriately preserved our rights by filing well in advance of the closing, by bringing a motion for a temporary restraining order and a motion for preliminary injunction well in advance of any closing. So we look forward to being heard on our motion for temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction. We think we've made a very persuasive and compelling case that in 3 markets, when you do the analysis, the numbers don't lie, the data doesn't lie. These are 3 markets where the law is being broken based on the level of concentration that would be achieved if this merger were consummated. So the temporary restraining order and the preliminary injunction is very important, but we believe we've preserved all of our rights to block this merger by filing timely yesterday.
Paramount's lead trial counsel, Jeffrey Kessler, held an interview on another network today, Attorney General, and said not only is this a legal transaction, but they are prepared to bring this matter to the Supreme Court. Are you?
Of course. Well, whatever it takes. We're in for the long haul.
Is that where this goes?
I don't know. We just started the case yesterday. I thought it was peculiar, honestly, to start talking about the Supreme Court on a case that just started in trial court. These cases can take time. They can take weeks, months, years, depending on what the parties do. I'm talking about the defendants here. We're looking forward to a quick, expedited resolution of our claims because we think we're right and we think the court will find in our favor. But you know, the case has just begun. So I think it's an attempt to sort of suggest that that a court that I think will be favorable to them will ultimately hear this case. And I have no idea if that's true. But we're in trial court. We think we're going to win in trial court. We think we're going to block the merger with a restraining order or a preliminary injunction, and we think we're going to win this case ultimately, whether it be at the trial level, the intermediate appellate level, or the U.S. Supreme Court. We've won big cases in front of the U.S. Supreme Court time and time again, including birthright citizenship just recently, National Guard, tariffs. We feel very comfortable in front of any court because we have the facts and the law on our side.
Well, and of course, when we consider some of those very same court cases, it's clear to many Americans how those decisions will impact them. What would your message be to an American wondering what about the media they're able to consume would really be different if these companies are allowed to merge?
This case is about Americans' affordability, their ability to pay their satellite bills, their cable bills, their ability to experience one of the joys of life and go to the movies without it breaking the bank. And if this proposed merger goes through, the cost to go to a movie will go up. The cost of your cable bill will go up. The cost of your satellite bill will go up. And I'm telling this to Americans who I know are already screaming about unaffordability in their lives, that it's very difficult to make their lives affordable and to make ends meet, whether it be gas or groceries, housing or healthcare. This unlawful proposed merger will make their costs go even higher. So that's why we brought the case, to protect everyday consumers from being harmed by an unlawful merger that has substantial anti-competitive impacts and that we believe is monopolistic.
Attorney General Bonta, I want to ask you about something unrelated that we mentioned before the start of our conversation, and that's the New York decision today, a statewide decision to implement a 1-year moratorium on data centers. We've heard this conversation a lot around the country. You probably have, too. It's been featured in a lot of primary debates in different states. You know the NIMBYism that follows this whole idea in terms of competing for water, for power, for other resources, the impact that we've seen on our electric bills. Is this something that California would consider?
I think it's an interesting proposal as I was listening to it. And I think New York looks at California. I think California looks at New York to see what solutions they're advancing to address some of the challenges of our day. And AI is here. We need to embrace the upside of AI that can cure diseases and make us healthier, make our lives longer, make us safer, make us more efficient. And we need to guard against the downsides. They are massive downsides, like catastrophic risk and teaching kids how to kill themselves and having sexually explicit conversations with kids and creating non-consensual sexually explicit images using AI. The list goes on. and how data centers are created, where they're created, who pays for them, are important questions to be asking. So grateful that Governor Hochul is confronting this issue and proposing a solution. I think balanced, reasonable proposals can be advanced here, and I think California will definitely be looking at what New York did to see if that's the best course forward and to see what we do.
And finally, Mr. Attorney General, I'd like to ask you as well about a speech we're expecting President Trump to make to the nation on Thursday evening. The reporting indicates that he is going to be talking about the 2020 election and ideas of election interference overall. He, of course, already alleged that there was fraud in California, given how long it took to tally the ballots in the primary earlier this year. And I just wonder what the state is bracing for in the general midterm election in November in terms of potential lawsuits that could follow or interference at the polls or after the votes are in.
Unfortunately, it's more wild-eyed conspiracy theories being advanced by the President of the United States. He lost the 2020 election. He lost the 2020 election. He lost the 2020 election. There's no other way to say it. And this is the person who tried to ask election officials in Georgia to find him more votes, so he could win when he lost. This is the person who fueled the January 6th incident, an insurrection that tried to undermine the certification of the election of Joe Biden. This is the person that seized ballots in Fulton County, Georgia. So if he wants elections to be free of interference, he should do nothing. He is the person interfering with them. He is the person undermining the integrity and the fairness and accuracy of our elections. Counting ballots is not cheating. Counting ballots is making sure every person's vote is counted and honored, and that their right to vote is realized, and that they are fully franchised instead of disenfranchised. And so we're prepared for everything. We're prepared for anything. What is being proposed is bizarre, wild-eyed, conspiracy theorist, more of the same. It's also dangerous. And so we are preparing for the National Guard or military to be at polls. We're prepared for interference through the U.S. Postal Service in vote by mail voting. We're prepared for the potential attempts to seize ballots. We have been table-topping and gaming out all the possible scenarios, and we owe our constituents readiness and preparedness, and we are ready, and we are prepared. We're prepared for these types of dangerous conspiracy theory-fueled conduct by the president and his allies who would follow him in that regard, and we are committed to protecting every person's right to vote, protecting democracy, protecting the rule of law in California and beyond.
Sounds like we should continue this conversation, Attorney General, and we'd like to stay in touch with you on this Paramount suit. California's Attorney General Rob Bonta, we thank you for joining us on Bloomberg. For the first time in 7 years, justices of the Supreme Court testified before Congress. Coming up after the break, what the justices said as they spoke before the House, plus our political panel joins to unpack today's developing news. All next on Balance of Power, only on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kaylee Lyons in Washington, where for the first time in 7 years, justices of the Supreme Court testified on Capitol Hill today, taking questions on their latest budget request. Two justices, Elena Kagan and Amy Coney Barrett, testified about the rising threat that justices have faced and the need for more than $14 million to support additional security. Justice Barrett detailed, in fact, how the rise in new threats have impacted her own family.
When threats to my life were particularly intense a few years ago, around the time of the Dobbs leak, my security detail sent me home with a bulletproof vest, and I carried it into my house, put it into my bedroom, dropped it down on a table, turned around, and my 12-year-old son was standing in the doorway of my bedroom, and he wanted to know what it was and why I had it. And I didn't know how to respond because maybe I lack imagination, but I didn't expect that performing this service was going to put me in the position of explaining to my children what a bulletproof vest was and why I had to wear one.
Pretty stunning testimony from the justices today. And joining us now On both that and the other big stories of the day is our political panel. Democratic strategist Adam Hodge, managing director at Bully Pulpit International, and Republican strategist Sarah Chamberlain, the president and CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership. Welcome to you both. Sarah, obviously, the justices, it seems, have good reason for wanting more money for their own security, but there are plenty of people all across government who want more money for various things. And the question I have is whether anyone's going to be able to get it by the time the fiscal year is over on September 30th, or if all of this is heading quickly toward a shutdown ahead of the midterms.
So there's 23 days left of legislative business, and my prediction would be that the government will shut down the end of September. That we have problems within the Republicans and the Democrats. There's no incentive for them to do anything to help us, especially in the Senate. So I think we're looking at it. Scary time. But right now, I bet, yes, that's going to
shut down at the end of September, staring at November. Could take a while before you reopen.
It could be lame duck.
It could be lame duck. Well, so, we hear from a lot of lawmakers about the scar tissue they have from the last record-setting shutdown. Adam, you remember that, too. Are Democrats willing to go there?
I mean, I think we all should hope that cooler heads prevail and that we don't shut down. I mean, that they should be able to pass just a clean CR that gets us through Election Day. But I think Sarah's right to point out that the Republican caucus is in a bit of disarray on this issue. Democrats see no reason to give the White House or the Congress on the Republican side any political wins here in the last month or so before Election Day. So unfortunately, we may end up there. Now, in the past, we've been down this road before. We've just done a clean CR and got past Election Day and tackled it in the lame duck. That's what we should be able to do now. But I share, unfortunately, a little bit of Sarah's pessimism that we may be in another shutdown, and I don't know when that ends.
Well, and of course, what we're talking about here is the regular order appropriations process. Republicans already have twice gone through with the budget reconciliation process instead. And of course, President Trump is encouraging them to pursue a third reconciliation package now, in part to provide more funding to the Pentagon. I know that there's been meetings about this at the White House this week and today, even with House leadership reportedly. Is this going to get done, Sarah? Is the Senate on board? What are you hearing?
The Senate's not on board yet. The House, it should be okay in the House. The Senate's very questionable. There's a lot of senators there that are not big fans of President Trump's any longer. Obviously, they were defeated in primaries, and numbers matter. And we'll see. And Mitch McConnell, he is alive, but he is still in the hospital. He's recovering, so he may not be there. So it's going to be an interesting time. And Susan Collins, she's kind of in a box. What does she do? I mean, they will end up with a Democratic nominee soon, and we'll have to just kind of see where does her vote go. So I would not like to be Senator Thune right now.
Boy, no. And you wonder what role President Trump is playing in this Congress now. He's been called the real Speaker of the House, the real Senate Majority Leader. Now that things are starting to grind to a halt, is he more of an impediment for the Republican caucus to get anything done?
Certainly not in the House, but in the Senate, I mean, there are a couple senators sitting there. The politics are very different now. Now that some of the primaries are over, they were defeated. Obviously, Tillis, who's not running again, and one in the hospital. So the dynamics have changed. It's not as simple as picking up the phone anymore. It's not as simple anymore, no, because these men, their careers have probably ended. They're older gentlemen, and they don't have an allegiance to President Trump, potentially, because he defeated them in the primaries. However, the caveat there is they have allegiance to Senator Thune. I mean, they're friends. They're actually colleagues and friends.
Go ahead, Adam.
Just to jump in, I think Sarah's onto something with Susan Collins, right? I mean, she really is in a box, because this is all to pay for the war that voters in Maine and voters across the country have been clear that they don't support and don't think we should spend a whole lot more money doing. But as chair of the Appropriations Committee, she's got to force this through. And so does she anger the White House by not going forward with what the president wants to do, or does she do what's in her political best interest and trying to slow walk this? And so I don't envy her position, but there's no question Democrats will find a way to make this as difficult for her and other members of the Senate caucus as we head barrel towards Election Day.
Well, since we're talking about Maine and Senator Collins and the race for her seat, Sarah, to what extent is that complicated by the death we saw in Maine yesterday, where ICE agents shot and killed another man, the second in a week? The DHS has now ordered vehicle stops to be halted by ICE for the time being. But I would imagine that this is something that works against the Republican.
It is certainly working against her right now. They are picketing outside her offices, though I do think great tragedy, clearly, but I do think by November this will be in the back.
Picketing outside of lawmakers' offices? Is that?
They were at her office doing some picketing.
I understand.
Yeah, complaining. But I do think this is a tragedy, but I think the ICE issue would come to the back. It's going to be cost of living. I really do think that's what people are going to go and vote on.
How are Democrats feeling about this, Adam? You tried to exact a number of reforms. We've been talking about shutdowns. That's what it was all about many months ago, and it ended up being a record. There are some concerns among Democrats that body cameras are not being turned on, which was agreed to. Of course, the warrant issue, the demasking issue, never moved the needle. What does the party do now?
Joe, I'll push back on that a little bit. I think it did move the needle politically on the immigration issue. I think if you look at where the president and where Republicans were before that last shutdown, they were in a much stronger footing on immigration. And I think it is terrible for the president's politics, for Susan Collins' politics, if members of ICE are gunning down American citizens or other people on the streets of Maine, of Minnesota, of Houston, right? Like, those are not good optics. It's not good policy. And the things that we're asking for, the Democrats are pushing for, are pretty common sense. I mean, in no other law enforcement agency can you really get around wearing masks around the country. Body cameras should be a very obvious thing to go forward. And so I think Democrats will continue to hammer this. And if we can fight the neutral on immigration, that gives us a whole additional leg up to then keep pounding on affordability and those issues. So I think you want Democrats, I think, to be on that position where they really can own the landscape and on the waterfall on those issues.
Well, and in our final moment, Sarah, on affordability, oil prices are climbing higher once again. That could very quickly turn into higher gasoline prices if that trend continues at the pump. The president obviously notified Congress about the resumption of hostilities with Iran formally just days ago. How does that sit with members of the Main Street Caucus?
So it's the new 60 days, so the clock starts again. So that's key for the legalities. They want this to be over. They wanted what's going on today to be done back in March. I mean, go in there, let's get this cleaned up, not put boots on the ground, but go in, clean it up. Let's put this behind us in the rearview mirror. He started out slow. I think it's good that he's doing it now. And obviously, Iran provoked him. I mean, we were provoked. They did attack ships trying to go through the strait.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting time, but we're hoping to get this behind us and move forward.
About 30 seconds left, Adam. You were former spokesman for the National Security Council in the last administration. How would you be messaging this after the president said that part of the reason why he stopped this was to avoid an economic catastrophe?
I would try to finally get the administration, get the president on one clear, concise message. I mean, that's something we tried to do in the Biden administration on Ukraine, and I think it has been missing from day one of this conflict. And you still don't have the president offering a clear articulation of what is in it for the American people. He's failed to really make the case. And so when gas goes up to $3.88 a gallon, there's no explanations of why Americans should bear the cost. I think that's going to keep hammering him politically.
All right, Adam, thank you so much. And Sarah, Adam Hodge, Sarah Chamberlain, our great panel this evening. We thank you for trying to find both sides to these difficult issues. And we also encourage you to check out the Washington Edition newsletter. We've had a number of updates on all the stories we've been talking about today. You can find it on the terminal and online.
And you can find us back here tomorrow. Thanks for joining us on Balance of Power, and we'll see you for the Wednesday edition tomorrow on Bloomberg TV and radio.